You know when people say, oh, you can forgive and forget, but they aren't the ones that have been hurt. They aren't the ones that have been betrayed, and they really have no idea how you feel. When you feel like that, how can you move forward? How can you forgive? Should you forgive? That's what we're talking about on today's episode of the Self-Improvement Room. Hey, welcome to episode number 47 of the Self-Improvement Room podcast. I'm Christy Davis, and I am looking forward to today's topic. Actually, this was a question sent in from one of our listeners, and their question was, what do I think about forgiveness? And it's a pretty fitting question because that is something that I struggled with for a lot of years. But before we get into this incredibly challenging topic, make sure you click the follow button because we put out an episode every single fortnight and sometimes you're going to forget. So make sure you click the follow button and you'll be notified about the next episode, which you won't want to miss because it is a pretty intense topic. In fact, it would burn me up so much with anger that I thought I would combust. Now, for some, it conjures up images of peace and resolution, which is nice, and that does happen. But for others, it's a painful reminder of betrayal, hurt, and sometimes deep-seated resentment. Now, I used to be in the hurt and betrayal camp, and I was convinced that holding on to my anger was the best way to protect myself from any further hurt and any further pain. And I have to tell you, forgiveness didn't gently knock on my door. It literally punched me right in the face. When my mind refused to forgive, that's when my body decided that I'd had enough and it started to give up. So that's one thing I want to talk about in today's episode of the podcast, and that's the physical toll of unforgiveness. See, for years I believed that if I held on to my anger and resentment, that would be my form of strength. I thought it gave me power over all of those people that had wronged me. And I had learnt, probably three years into my journey, that the only person truly suffering from this grip on past hurt, past trauma, past abuse was me. And I had to let it go because I was putting myself in mental handcuffs. The effects to begin with were only small. So it was like a little bit of stress, a little bit of loss of sleep. But gradually that all escalated and it became full-blown mental and physical health crisis for me. The first signs of trouble were chronic stress and anxiety. And I had never experienced anxiety in my life. I was quite lucky, actually. I grew up when I was young. I grew up as a child who had a lot of confidence, who did really well in school, who always tried my best and always got up the front in class and never really had any dramas about feeling not confident, not having enough self-worth. But that started to change as my life started to change. Now, when I was in high school, when I started high school, that's when my trauma really started in my life. My life became very different very quickly, and it became really a struggle of survival. And I didn't know what anxiety was, and I didn't know that I had anxiety. But going through the kind of stress and abuse that I was, there is no way that a child wouldn't suffer from anxiety and stress. I was constantly on the edge, and I was replaying everything that was happening to me over and over in my mind, and I was bracing myself for future offenses. So my heart would race, my palms would sweat, and I found it increasingly difficult to live my life. And that lasted for a very long time, even years after my abusive childhood. That constant state of heightened alertness is probably still there. And I've recently had a brain scan to say that it still looks like I'm walking on eggshells. I'm still in that 3Fs mode. And it's not the other 3Fs you're thinking about, although they are still there. I still live in the flight, fight, or freeze mode. And that still can take a very big toll on my physical and mental health. It puts a lot of stress on your body, that constant state of heightened alertness. And from there, I had persistent anxiety and then even bouts of depression. Soon, the emotional turmoil began manifesting itself in physical symptoms. My immune system became weak, and it made me susceptible to colds and flus and infections, and I was just sick all of the time. I was sick, I was tired, people thought I was a hypochondriac, I was looking for reasons to be sick so I didn't have to deal with the world, so I didn't have to deal with being here day to day, because I had had enough. I had already lived through more than anyone ever needs to live through. I was starting to get so sick that the cold sore virus was so prominent in my life that I would wake up with my lips 5 times the normal size and they were glued shut. I felt dirty, I felt sick, and I was over it. I started sleeping 16 hours a day, and then I was sleeping 2.5 hours broken sleep a night. I'd toss and I'd turn, and my mind would just run all night long. And that just resulted in fatigue and made it difficult to function during the day. It affected my motivation, my relationships, and my overall quality of life. It took me a very, very long time to understand what forgiveness truly means and what it would mean to me. And that's where I think forgiveness is often misunderstood. It's really not about condoning or excusing what has been done to you. It's about freeing yourself from the mental handcuffs that hate and anger have on you. And they do. You don't realize it because you get into this habit of feeling this way, but it really does put you in what I like to call mental handcuffs. So freedom is really about reclaiming your peace and well-being. It's not about forgiving the other person, because even though I forgive, I'm never going to talk to that person in my life again. They are no longer in my life. They never will be. I don't forget what has happened. I don't necessarily forgive them for what they did, but I do forgive what happened so that I can move on, so that I can live my life. And I'm going to talk even more throughout the podcast about the good that came from this kind of trauma and the good that can come from letting go and forgiving, even when you really probably feel like you shouldn't. So let's talk about some reasons to forgive. So forgiveness, firstly, number 1, heals emotional wounds. This trauma would be classed as pretty significant. So for me, when I hear forgiveness heals emotional wounds, I kind of like to use my middle finger. It was really that hard to accept. But here's the thing. Holding on to anger and resentment keeps emotional wounds open. It's kind of like, I remember when I was young, I got a crimper, like a hair crimper, which I was really excited about. And I had heated up my crimper and I was waiting to start doing my hair. And I just had a shower And so I had my towel on and I sat on my bed on my crimper, which was incredibly hot. And it burnt me right in a spot where every time I sat and stood, the scab or the wound, the burn would open up again. It was incredibly painful. And the emotional wounds kind of remind me of that story. Every time you think about them, every time you hold on to them, it's like me getting up out of my school seat and this burn opening up again. Incredibly painful. But forgiveness allows you to close those wounds and begin that healing process. It helps you release the pain associated with those past hurts. And that makes more room for positive emotions like joy and love and peace. Because if you're full up with anger and resentment, you don't have room to experience the better parts of life. And sometimes it might feel good to hold on to anger. It might feel good to hold on to resentment. It might feel like that's the only thing you can do. But sometimes we forget how good joy and peace and happiness feel because we don't allow ourselves to experience them. So that's number one reason that I had decided I needed to forgive. Number two was because it reduced my stress and anxiety. And I got so good at forgiving later on in life that I had once again been very angry with somebody in my life who consistently hurt somebody very close to me. And this was over a period of years, and I just couldn't let go, and I just couldn't let them win either. But one day I decided, and I realized that once again, I was just so full up with anger and resentment and trying to control this situation that my life was passing me by and they were getting the best of me. And in an instant, I was able to let go. I'm still trying to process exactly how to do that. I'm not sure how I got to that level, but these are some tips that will, start to take you on your way and help you get there. You might get there as quickly as I did, but it can be a bit of a process. So number two, I forgave because it reduces anxiety and stress. Now, there are numerous studies that have shown forgiveness is linked to lower levels of stress and anxiety. By letting go of negative emotions, you reduce the psychological burden on your body. And they're doing a lot of studies now, and a lot of research is truly showing that there absolutely is a connection between mind and body. Now, I've always believed that because I can literally make a cold sore appear within 30 seconds. And my husband never used to believe me. And he would watch me stress and I would say, oh no, I think a cold sore is coming. And within 30 seconds, there was a little cold sore. And within 3 minutes, there was a bigger one. And within an hour, cold sore was eating up my face. You should have seen me for the week of our wedding. I was told that I even got over-the-counter stuff and then that didn't work, and then I went and got a prescription and my face was still burning with cold sores because I was just not very good at processing stress. So there absolutely is that link between mind and body, and if you forgive, then you are reducing that stress, that psychological toll that it takes on your body, and that can lead to better mental health, better sleep, a stronger immune system, better gut health. They say that your gut is your second brain, so take a prebiotic. But stress and anxiety will wreak havoc on your mental and physical body. Number three, forgiveness improves relationships. Not always. Sometimes it improves the relationship by never speaking to the person again. But forgiveness can transform your relationships. It allows room for empathy, understanding, and compassion. And that teaches you to connect with others on a deeper level. And this is one of the gifts that I was given. I was hurt so badly as a child and as a teenager that I knew the exact person that I wanted to be. And I am able to be compassionate and empathic and understanding to everybody. Sometimes not my husband. That needs a bit of work. Sometimes I feel like I can understand when people are hurting because I've been there. And that makes me want to help more. That makes me want to contribute. In fact, that's the reason I do this podcast. It helps me connect with people on a deeper level. It also sets a positive example, encouraging others to be forgiving and to create a more harmonious environment. Because let me tell you, not forgiving and holding on to that anger and resentment does not foster a harmonious environment to live in at all. I can honestly say that forgiveness has made me a better person. It has made me a more understanding person. It has made me a better parent. Most of the time, it makes me a better wife. Overall, learning to forgive has given me an incredible gift. But I guess the question is how? How do you forgive? Now, with practice and understanding, I think that is how I came to be able to forgive so quickly. But unfortunately, forgiveness is not a one and done event. It's a process that requires effort and commitment. I think that's one of the hardest things. To commit to something is already difficult enough. To put effort into something is already difficult enough. So why would you want to put it somewhere that could possibly help somebody else? Remember, it's going to help you first. But it's not a one and done event. Just like personal development. It's a process, it's a journey, and you have to commit to it. So I'm going to give you 4 tips to help you make your first steps towards forgiveness. Number 1, I probably say this on almost every podcast. I'm sure of it, in fact. But you must practice self-compassion. Forgiving others often starts with forgiving yourself. Now, you might be thinking, I haven't done anything wrong. It wasn't me. But it's not forgiving yourself for anything that you have done regarding the person that's hurt you. It's just learning to forgive yourself in general. You forgot to pick up the mail. You forgot to pack your kids' lunch. Oops. Forgive and learn. It's really about acknowledging your own mistakes and imperfections and being okay with them. Understand that everyone, including you, is capable of growth and change. Now, I say capable of. That really doesn't mean that they will. It just means I think that everybody is capable of it. So by being kind to yourself, you're really creating that foundation for extending that kindness to others. So practice self-compassion. It makes you a more compassionate person. Ooh, this next one is difficult. And I think that we should do it in all aspects of our life, not just when we're trying to forgive. And this one is reframe your perspective. Man, I think perspective is everything. I really do. It brings to mind that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's hard sometimes to shift our perspective, but it's important to shift perspective from being a victim to being a survivor or feeling empowered. Instead of focusing on how you were wronged, consider what you can learn from the experience. Consider what you've learned. Consider how you've grown. What strengths have you developed as a result of what you've been through? This reframing can help you see the situation in a more positive light, and it makes forgiveness easier. And this is one big thing that I did, because I know I'm the person I am today because of the abuse I suffered as a child. And let me tell you, there is not another person on this planet that can hurt me more than I was already hurt. That makes me pretty powerful within my own mind. Nobody can hurt me the way I've been hurt before. However, that changed when I had children, because I know that that's my vulnerability, that's my weakness. I know that if somebody hurts my children, they're going to hurt me. But again, I have the strength to, what is that saying? Something about a storm. Oh, to weather every storm. So again, my experiences, as terrible as they were, they are now what I use to draw strength. I've had so many doors close in my face, especially throughout my music career, and I would just bounce back up. I couldn't quit. Many people can't keep going. I have this thing where I just cannot quit, because really those pains are nothing to me. I'm so resilient from my experiences with hurt that there really is very little that I fear in my life. Obviously, I fear the dangerous things, but I don't fear having a go at different things. I don't fear trying to chase my dreams. And to me, that is a huge gift in forgiveness. Number 3 is seek understanding and empathy. So try to understand the perspective of the person who wronged you. What? I know. I said number 2 was hard. This one was almost impossible, because there are 2 people that have really, really hurt me in 2 very different ways in my life. And to even think about what their pain or their challenges are in life was really hard, because I didn't really give a crap. I didn't care. I didn't care what had made them be that way or do those things, because they were just wrong. But there has to be a reason. So I still don't know what motivated some actions or what some of their pains were. And whatever it was doesn't excuse their behavior. But it can help develop some empathy and reduce some of the intensity of your anger. And sometimes, like I said, this may not work. And in my experience, it took a very, very long time to get to this point. But number 3, seek understanding and empathy. Because you might be able to see something that you couldn't see before, which might make it easier for you to understand what has happened and why they did what they did. Number 4, this is a really good one. Let go of your expectations. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It doesn't always mean everything's going to go back to the way it was and everyone's going to be happy. Sometimes it's about letting go of the expectation that the other person will apologize or make amends. We really have to focus on what we can control. And unfortunately, that is our own actions and our own feelings. That's what we can control. Release the need for validation from others and find peace within yourself. And that really sounds monk-like to me. But it really is the way to forgiveness. My journey to forgiveness wasn't easy, but it definitely was transformative. I started by practicing self-compassion and acknowledging that my unwillingness to forgive was really rooted in my own pain and fear. And once I reframed my perspective and recognized that holding on to my anger was not protecting but harming me, the layers started to peel away. I really wanted to understand the motivations and struggles of those who had hurt me, which to a degree did help me develop empathy and reduce my anxiety and resentment. But I got to tell you, part of me had to put it down to there is just something wrong with these people. Sometimes there just isn't an answer. But finally, I was able to let go of the expectation that I would find an answer, that I would ever get an apology, or that things would ever go back to the way they were. But I forgave them once again for my own sake, not theirs. As I began to be okay with forgiveness and even seek to forgive, I noticed a profound change in my health and many positive changes in my life. My stress and anxiety levels dropped and my physical health improved. In fact, I barely get cold sores anymore. And it really doesn't take a lot because of the way my body is now made up and my mind is now made up from the trauma as a child that I suffered as a child. I understand that I have to be very careful with too much negativity too quickly because it really does have a big impact on my body and on my mental health. So I now sleep better. I now feel more energized. My stress levels have dropped. My anxiety levels have dropped. In fact, I don't ever really feel anxious at all. And my relationships became more positive and fulfilling. I became a better parent. I became a better wife. I became a better friend, a better sibling, a much better daughter. But most importantly, I really felt a sense of peace that I really hadn't experienced since I was young, since I was in primary school. And I was no longer a prisoner of what had happened to me in the past. I felt like I was free to live now and create the future that I'm creating now. Like I said, forgiveness punched me in the face. I didn't want to forgive, but I'm really grateful for it. It forced me to confront the truth that my mind refused to accept, and that is that holding on to anger and resentment was destroying me from the inside out. My body, which is far smarter than me, made me see that forgiveness was just not a moral virtue, but it was a necessity for my own well-being. So if you're struggling to forgive, know that you absolutely aren't alone. It's a challenging journey, and sometimes you're going to feel like you don't want to do it, but I guarantee it is one that is worth taking. By letting go of those thoughts, those angers and resentments, you're taking off those mental handcuffs of hate and anger. And you can heal those emotional wounds, which will reduce stress and anxiety and improve your relationships. Practice self-compassion, reframe your perspective, seek understanding and empathy, and let go of expectations. Forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about you and living in peace. Forgiveness really changed my life, and it made me who I am today. There you go. Forgiveness. That's episode number 47 of the Self-Improvement Room. Make sure you click the follow button so you don't miss an episode that could really impact your life. Hopefully like this one today. All right, until next time, stay safe, forgive, and stay well.